Welcome to another episode of the Unconventional Christian Podcast, and I am your host, Ladun Thompson. And today we have an unconventional Christian, an amazing Reverend and Pastor, and that is our good brother Hodari Williams in the building. What's going on, good brother?
Not much, man. Excited about this discussion and glad to be on your podcast.
Me too. I'm excited to have you on here as well. You are actually our first man of the cloth on here today. So, you know what? We always start the podcast with a prayer, and since you're here today, I would love to have you lead us in prayer today, if that's okay with you.
That's cool with me. Cool with
Yes,
me.
Sir.
Yes.
Come on ahead.
To an all-wise and knowing Creator, we come this evening first pausing just to honor your presence in our lives, to honor the many ways in which you have been with us, journeyed with us, enlightened us, touched us with your spirit. We go into this moment of conversation, understanding that our voice will be magnified in many ways, oh God, to reach many people. And we pray, oh God, that what we say is of a blessing and uplifts and liberates and educates your people, oh God, ultimately. And that all that we do and all that we say might be pleasing in your sight and in line with your will. Guide us now in this moment, and we'll be so ever careful to give you the praise and glory which you deserve. For you alone, God, you are worthy. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Thank you. Appreciate that. I always surprise it. Every once in a while, I surprise one of our guests because I know if I know somebody can pray, I'm gonna let them pray because I'm praying all the time. So I'm still a student of the game. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm happy to have you on here today. First of all, can you tell me a little bit just about who you are, where you're from, everything? Just a quick rundown on who you are.
Sure. I hail from a little small town there in New Jersey called Lakewood, down on the shore. Was born and raised in that town. My family migrated from Jersey City. So I am the youngest of five boys. I have three sisters. I was raised in two religious traditions. I would say religious traditions and denominations. So my father was Baptist, and my mother's side of the family was Pentecostal, Church of God in Christ, and my grandmother was Muslim. So I've had a plethora of experiences, very ecumenical in nature, as a child, and saw both sides of both religions. Left New Jersey, went on to college, and in college, my calling to ministry was affirmed. I always knew from a young age that I wanted to exercise my gifts in the role of pastor. I just had that feeling, that affinity. I was drawn to it. And more so because I felt that was a way in which I could engage and do community change work, was through the church. So I went on to seminary, graduated seminary. I served, after seminary, I served in Kenya under the leadership of Professor Wangari Maathai, and I worked with women who were impacted by gender-based violence. Many of them Rwandan refugees who suffered through the genocidal acts that took place in Rwanda, and also did some small arms negotiating in the Horn of Africa. Returned back here, entered into seminary, and came back from Africa and entered into parish ministry there in East Orange. Started in East Orange, West Orange, and Newark, a multi-site church. I pastored in West Orange for a period of time until I assumed the role of all three congregations there in New Jersey, and departed after 10 years, and now am pastoring here in Atlanta, and currently working at the New Life Presbyterian Church, serving there, and pursuing my PhD at the same time in depth psychology with a focus in liberation, indigenous psychologies, and eco-psychology.
Whoa. Okay. There was a word you used earlier. I have to write. I wish I could. I'm going to have to record. Rewind this later. I think it was like, I can't remember the word, man. That was a good word, though. I just never heard the word before.
Ecumenical?
Oh, yes. Ecumenical. I am not afraid to say I do not know. So ecumenical. I'm going to write that down later on. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, what I will say to you is that, I don't know. It's amazing to hear what service and obedience sounds like, you know, being someone who's currently in this space where I feel like, I don't know, I'm not ready. It could be that moment where the dark night of the soul is going to happen for me. But I'm in that space where until I hear clearly what God wants for me to do. But I'm in a space where I'm just being of ministry, which is quite unconventional in its methods. It's just more of just being of service to the people, and you know, just trying to really be obedient. Now, for you, how did you know when, like, what was that moment that you realized that, look, I got to be obedient to this calling?
So, you know, people are called in various ways. And I thank God for my seminary experience, which really affirmed my calling, because I didn't hear a voice, the sky didn't crack open. I was first called by the community identifying my gifts. And when we look at the various ways biblically and how people were called, we know that many people were just identified as prophets and leaders. Right. So from a young age, that's how I was recognized. But when it culminated for me was a dream that I had in college, and that dream awakened me to such a reality that this was what I was passionate about. This is what was calling my soul, and I couldn't shake it. I remember that evening vividly. I woke up. I was crying. I was having a moment filled with just awe in the fact that God was choosing me for something like this. And in my dream, I was standing before masses of people. I could see me from the back. I was looking at my back, my head, and the crowd. And I was speaking and talking and looking at people were looking intently what was going on. So I reached out to my, at that time, family pastor, and he walked me through my dream and my vision. And he said, you know, it feels as if your dream is expressing to you a calling to prepare for ministry. So I'm going to encourage you to do that. And that's what sent me to seminary. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. No, this is interesting. I'm, you know, one thing that's been a big conversation that's been amongst my friends and people I'm around is obedience, man. And obedience is you know, so crazy. This is completely, you know, a lot of times I start these conversations and I have my ideas of where it's going, but this is totally not going where I thought I was going. But it's good though. It's important because a lot of people are in this place where I think a lot of people are torn between being hot for God and also still being what you would say lit. You know what I'm saying? I say lit all the time because people don't see it being possible. It's like it's either you're a prude and honoring God, but in the same token, being like a light in the world and still being cool. And it's that torn feeling of being like, man, I don't want to be out of your will, God. But it's like at the same time, you don't know, like it takes real discernment to be able to understand whether you're being hot or you're being lukewarm. And if you're being lukewarm, you're gonna get spit out. So it's definitely very interesting to hear you talk about that, because I can't put my finger on it, but it's something about your light that I feel just in the honesty of this conversation, and it's still more to learn from you, because I think a lot of people are looking now, especially in this day and age, for pastors or leaders who really are what they say. You know what I'm saying? And one of the biggest things that now is a big issue for just like, I would even say just for the Christian faith itself, is that we've seen so many mega church leaders and they fall victim to temptation, especially temptation outside of the union of their marriage. What is your advice to people who are like torn or looking in this space? Because of course it's easy for us to say. For me, I'm always going to say, like, these people are human, you know what I'm saying? And we still have to give them grace. But in the same token, it's like within the last 2 years, I've seen so many pastors fall, and it's kind of tough when you're having those conversations with people who want to, who were once followers of a church or a specific mega church, and now they're just like, well, I was just so disappointed with what happened with that pastor. What do we say to these people, especially young folks, because they're in a space now where organized religion is just under such attack.
Yeah. Wow, you said a lot there, and it's a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah,
no, it's cool.
I'm gonna run it back to the main question being, what is your advice to people who are looking specifically at these pastors that are falling? You know what? I'll go back to this. Why is it that so many pastors are falling short in that specific place when it comes to the marriage?
Well, there could be, and as a community psychologist and focused in psychology, there could be a plethora of reasons as to why we are seeing and experiencing the human vulnerabilities of church leaders.
Right.
Some of it is related. First of all, this is why I'm an unconventional Christian, because the current form of Christianity in which we find ourselves is usually a white evangelical form of Christianity and theology that separates the sacred and the secular, the flesh and the body.
Right.
And what informs my Christianity is African cosmology, where all of life is sacred. There's no division in that. The same, and it's going to be rough and hard for people to handle.
I love it.
There are same spirits and feelings and emotions and knowledge that I can receive from a brother speaking and preaching and hip hop that I can get, and I can get it in R&B, that I can get in some of the same music that I hear in the church.
Right.
But specifically, these folks, what we're finding too is a culture that many people fall victim to. A lot of pastors enter into things prematurely because they're trying to live for the people. They marry because they believe no one will follow a single man in leadership. So the first thing you do, and as a pastor, I've been a pastor for a long time, the first thing you do is find a wife. Now, because you want to find a church. And in the process of that, you have not engaged yourself in a relationship. You have not fallen, quote unquote, I'll use the term, in love. You have not explored your desires with your wife or whoever it may be. You don't even know if you really like that person. And then you find the pressures of ministry compounding upon you. And what happens is you act out in ways that engage, that they label self-sabotage. Right. You sabotage your own success because of your fears that you have and the unresolved issues. And some of it, it could be related to childhood, how people have been cultured, what they've experienced in relationships. But many pastors who find themselves in that situation as well, I will say, they live divided lives.
Right.
They find themselves having to present a mask to the people,
right,
live a separate life. And you can't do that but so long before it comes to a head. You've got to be authentically yourself all the time. And that's a challenge for some people, because right. Pastors live for the people and put themselves on the back burner.
Right. And I see it all the time, because a lot of pastors, I think that there are so many pastors that are, why this is the Unconventional show and the Unconventional Christian Podcast, because one of the things that a lot of these people are people who are born and bred in churches, right? And they've never experienced what it's like to have that type of attention, that fame. And people don't, when Jay-Z talks about fame in that specific song, it's really contagious. It can take over you. And a lot of these people are, to be honest, I use this term very loosely, but they can be very prude in like their upbringing. All they knew was church. They went to church. They went to Bible study on Wednesday. It was a church on Sunday. Some of these people were raised in that setting, and they never really had that street experience of dating multiple women, getting your heart broken, being a player for a little while, and going through AKA so-called, even men specifically, even going through that whole phase. I use that term like that, but because women talk about a whole phase, and specifically, when I say that a lot of men have not gone through those experiences. Like you said, they finally get to a space. They want to be a pastor. They know they have to be married. They find a good woman, somebody that people are recommending to you. You don't even know this person. This person doesn't really know you. You guys haven't gone through the ups and downs. And especially in that time when they haven't dealt with a thing such as, they haven't dealt with a thing such as, I think specifically in just dealing with having to learn how to pivot, you know what I mean? Because relationships require a lot of pivoting. So a lot of these people are just going into this head on and not really even realizing what this really entails. So it's interesting. I see it all the time. And a lot of times for me, it's such a tough issue, because I am a person who extends so much grace, and I understand exactly where they're coming from. But at the same time, I think there just has to be like this prerequisite that has to be in place now for pastors. There has to be a new method that has to be in place than just highlighting somebody just because of their gift and their light. It's really like, how do they deal with these temptations? Because I think realistically, becoming a megachurch, even though you don't even have to become a megachurch pastor to become a rock star, because becoming a pastor is like becoming a rock star. And I think a lot of people can't deal with that.
Not if you don't have the foundation to be able to manage the amount of attention that you're gonna get on a weekly basis. Right. Every Sunday is surrounded with that energy.
Right.
And if you're not rooted and grounded in yourself, and you don't have that ability to check yourself and have confidence and not manipulate your power, because that's and ultimately that's what you find is it is an abuse of power. Pastors are in a powered position, and people depend on them, and that power can be exploited. And that's what happens sometimes. People exploit the power and use it over the people they serve. And that's a sad reality. It's in mega church and small church. It's in the city church and the rural church. It happens everywhere. But it's a personality defect.
Right. Have you personally felt like ego, like an ego creeping up on you in certain spaces? Have you ever really had a moment where you had to check yourself, like, wait, hold up, let me bring myself back down to earth real quick, because I know it's so easy just being in that space to, if you don't have enough people to check you, or like you don't have an accountability circle, it's so easy for you to get to a space where you can get out of pocket.
Yeah. Honestly, I can't think back to a moment outside. I think probably there was one point in my ministry where I felt I had reached this just this pinnacle, this high point.
Right.
And my actions were starting to fall into traditional ways that I had seen pastors, evolve. And like you said, I had an accountability circle. And there's one thing that I've always firmly believed and has been beneficial to me is I have been in therapy and stay in therapy. So that therapeutic process helps me and grounds me in those moments. But that was one time where, you got a powerful moment. You preached a word that, some people would say, you kind of knocked it out the park.
Right.
And you feel some kind of way about yourself, and it goes beyond you acknowledging the power of God to you thinking, I'm
doing my thing.
Brother, you're doing your thing. And you got to check those moments. And if you don't check it, God has a way, you'll find yourself falling flat on your face the next time. And you wonder why. And thank God that there were people around me, specifically elders who was like, I see you, I see what you're doing, but remember who's giving you the ability to do it. And that grounds me.
Nah, that's important. That's good, because I talk about accountability partners all the time, especially just in my tribe, my circle of people that I talk to, that I minister to via social media. And I think it's just I think accountability, like people, the hardest thing now is that a lot of people are unable to be accountable in this day and age, especially in our community. You know what I mean? I think that and I'll keep it, and I'll put it right at marriage and stuff like that. I think, is it important for there to be accountability within the marriage?
It's important. It's valuable. It's important. It is the preserver of a marriage. Folks have to be accountable to one another.
But and one of the things that make it so hard, though, because we are coming from we're coming from a place slightly of, I would say, a setback to an extent, because in our community, we're still trying to heal as a community from traumas. Just in general, everyone's coming into relationships and we're all coming with swords, and we're coming in here ready for war. Everyone's a warrior coming in marriage, coming in relationships. And it's so hard for us to get to a space of being accountable, whether it be men, whether it be women. No one wants to really get to a place where someone, I'm not even saying everybody, but it's a lot of people, and I see it all the time in conversations, that it's hard for people to be accountable with each other. And hence why a lot of marriages fall fast, very quickly. How, when it comes to marriage in the Black community, do you think that it's currently in jeopardy?
I'm not sure if it's in jeopardy. I think marriage in our communities has been a challenge just because of the lack of healthy models. that we haven't had. We've really seen unhealthy models, and some of the models that we have seen that are healthy are not relevant to our time. So, maybe we had two grandparents who loved each other,
Right.
and, grandma stayed at home and grandpa went to work, and he brought the check home every Friday, and grandma handled it.
Right.
The reality is today's woman and today's man may be operating in the same way, but does a man feel like a man in a relationship when a woman is providing just as much? And does a woman respect a man who doesn't necessarily bring financially what she can to the table? So you have those different dynamics that are at odds with each other. And then just how we relate, how we're taught to relate to one another, how we're socialized. One thing that has picked up for me during this pandemic is counseling sessions with people in marriage, because people have had to come face to face with realities that they were avoiding through work, through extracurricular activities, and now they have to be in the same space and deal with it. But I think what is happening is now the marriage roles and responsibilities are evolving, and people in our generation are accepting that reality and being comfortable with it. So a man doesn't have no problem being at home, taking care of his children. If his wife is out working, it doesn't make him any less of a man. So the role is changing. I don't think it's in jeopardy, but I think as time goes on, what we see is an evolution in the marital state within our communities.
Right. And I think a lot of people, in my mind, I think that like people don't want to pivot, because I think a pivot is very important in relationships, especially marriage, being able to adjust, because like you said, one thing people have not seen is a great model of what marriage is supposed to look like. To this day, my standard, I had amazing parents who were married, and my father has passed now. So, but I still was a person who was raised on love. But even in that space, my idea, it's still a level of romanticism, is the Cosby Show. I still believe that is possible. Because they held, but then again, because of the things that have happened in the latter years, it's almost like now it's a mirror that's shattered. It's cracked a little bit, because now it's seen as it's seen as unreal. It's seen as fictional. Do you think that the Cosby Show is still something that can be held to? I mean, for me, it is. It's something I look at. Do you think that it's something that people can look at, or is that considered a romanticism?
I think that level of love, mutuality, mutual respect, camaraderie, friendship, romance, all of those things are possible. And I'm not speaking from just, I would like to say in my own marriage, I am. Last week was my anniversary. We couldn't make it to Jamaica, so I brought Jamaica to my backyard. Still, I hired a chef, made sure my wife felt like she was somewhere on a Caribbean island. And I think that's possible when people come into a relationship. This is the mistake I think people make. They come into relationships thinking about what they can get. But when you come into a relationship thinking about what you can give in abundance, those things that you possess that are valuable, when you come into a relationship wanting to give love and not focused on receiving it, but giving it, when two people do that, you create a synergy and an energy that is life-changing.
That was good. No, that's good stuff right there. Like I totally believe that. And it's a journey to get to that space, because a lot of times we are definitely giving with the idea of, I'm giving this to receive something at the end. And to me, once you get to that space of I'm giving specifically because I hope that I'm going to receive this at the end, it's no longer unconditional because it's love with conditions.
Yeah. So true.
How long have you and your wife been married?
12 years.
12 years. That's dope. And how many kids do you have?
We have 2 and 1 on the way.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow. Pandemic was good.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Pandemic was good.
Came out with a Rona baby. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So you have how many a boy, girl?
It'll be 3 boys.
3 boys. Oh man. You didn't get the girl you thought you were gonna get. How did your wife feel about that?
Factory closed.
How did she feel about the 3rd boy?
She's just happy, to have a healthy. I know she did aspire to have a girl, but she's excited either way now. That we're just gonna be able to bring another healthy child into this world. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
What are some important things now that's necessary to maintain and keep marriages spunky, if that's the word I want to use?
Well, understanding for me what has kept my marriage spunky and alive is understanding the individual side. And let me explain what I'm saying. Understanding that my life is not my wife's life.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to balance my vocation while at the same time supporting her dreams and aspirations.
All right.
And in doing that, my love is not restricting. My love is not controlling. And my love supports her reaching her highest potential. And when folks reach their highest potential, there's a flame ignited in a relationship that just can't be extinguished.
Right.
2 people are engaged in doing what they love, and they are supportive of that. It has created a great deal of spunk.
Yeah.
And then being creative and grateful. Sometimes we treat strangers better than we treat the people we are in relationships with.
Right.
Somebody does something for us that we don't expect them to do. We give them gratitude and we say thank you. The expectation in relationships is that the other person is always supposed to do this, or if they do it, it's just a part of our relationship. But the reality is, no, it's not. And we still ought to express gratitude, for what you do. Because you don't have to do it. You don't have to get up in the morning and make me breakfast. You don't have to fold a piece of clothing for me because I'm a grown person. I can do that myself.
Right.
And when we miss that gratitude and we miss the celebration, it's something sexy about celebration.
Right.
It does something and it affirms and lifts people. And that creates energy that just takes your marriage to another level.
Gratitude. Now you brought me to gratitude because I'm gonna tell you, Pastor Reverend Hodari, you have totally taken me off where I was going, but I'm loving it. This is organic. Gratitude, because I was listening to Darius Daniels yesterday, and he said it doesn't matter how good you are to ungrateful people. Ungrateful people will always be ungrateful. Do you think that ungrateful people can change?
I do, because I live with a sense of hope, and a hope that my gratitude impacts you in such a way that you see the power and the life-giving component of gratitude. Because gratitude is it's a way of being. It's a lifestyle. And I do believe that as people express that gratitude and show that gratitude over time,
right,
it has an impact on
people. So
people.
now I do want to touch on gratitude because gratitude is so important. And I think that we can talk about gratitude between people, but how important is gratitude for you in your life, and how has gratitude affected you?
Gratitude has affected me in the sense that the more I am benevolent, the more I show my excitement and gratitude for the things God has done, I find myself not only experiencing more joy, but also opportunities present themselves. I try to be grounded in gratitude. I try to wake up in the morning grateful for the day,
Right.
and conscious of how God can use me to be a blessing for somebody else. I told my congregation the other day, wake up in the morning just asking God, can I be somebody's blessing today? Can I be the blessing someone encounters?
Right.
And that's, for me, that's the gratitude I am showing because of what God has so graciously given unto me. And I honestly say, man, that it has opened tremendous doors. It has provided opportunities for me that I never thought or imagined. I could go down the laundry list of things that just unraveled in my life and blew my mind. And I think it's all back to the gratitude and the appreciation shown that God opens those doors and honors that.
Yeah, and one thing with that is it's so amazing for me, because I know for a fact how life can be so strenuous. Life can pull on you. Life can make you forget to be grateful because you wake up and it's something else. It seems like it's always something else. And I think that for me, it's like sometimes you do need to hear and understand. A lot of people don't understand how much gratitude does open doors for them. And sometimes we get in our own way because we wake up first thing in the morning, we're complaining through the day about this, that. And when you say that gratitude, just like being grateful for the people around you, for the air you're breathing, waking up in the morning and just being 100% grateful just opens doors and changes your mind frame. I'm just like, I can't even express it enough to people. Sometimes it sounds so cliche. You say to somebody like, just try and be grateful for what you do have. Like, what I mean? Even when they're going through the worst of situations, because I've seen how gratitude has changed my life. There are moments when I didn't have $20 in my pocket, and there were moments when I only had $20 in my pocket, and I remember hearing God say, "Give that $20 to this lady," and I'm like, "It's $20. Is it?" I'm thinking to myself, like, "This is lunch. This is dinner tonight." And I give the $20 to somebody, and next thing you know, I've had somebody walk by and say, "Yo, I'm just giving you a Holy Ghost handshake. It's $100 in here, bro." And it's like, we could take it to the science of things. It's that, like, when you take it to the science of things and you really are grateful and you're obedient and you do what God calls you to do, like, once you do it, God opens doors easily. But a lot of times we get in our own way and we're just so stuck because it's so hard to be obedient. And one thing I can say is almost a motto for this show. When we talk about obedience, that if you're obedient when God first puts something on your heart, it won't feel like such a sacrifice. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that's been my motto. And I love where gratitude is taking me in my life as well.
Yeah. It makes a difference, man. We got enough salty saints. We need folks. We need folks. That energy attracts energy, and you probably had this experience, man, where that gratefulness, it just leaps onto others, and they are attracted to it, and as that attraction leads to opportunity, and people wanting to be around you. Nobody wants to be around folks who constantly. And I'm not saying that we all don't have moments where we're in the throes, but what brings us out of that is to pause And like, the text says, be content.
Right.
And look at what is well in your life.
Right.
And what is going well. I used to hear old people when I was young, they'd be like, I just thank God that things are as well as they are, and over time, I've learned that, things could be worse. I'm just thanking God that they are as well as they are. I wish they sometimes were a little bit better, but I'm grateful right now for what's going on. And I'm going to celebrate that.
Right.
And that's been a blessing.
Right. Right. No, so I do want to get into some unconventional things here.
All right.
There is this age-old concept of there is no little sin and there's no big sin. Right? Now, one of the biggest things that we deal with now is the conversation about homosexuality in the Christian, specifically in the church. You know what I mean? It's just the unsaid and unspoken conversation, I think, that a lot of people dance on. You have some people that are going to be hot. There are some churches that are just going to be traditional churches, and they're going to stick to their guns, and they're going to talk about what homosexuality, how much, you see, even me, I'm stuttering here because, but it's a space where you talk about homosexuality, and it's like, it's a sin, it's abomination. But then where are we as a faith and as a church when it comes to homosexuality? Is it a big sin? Is it a little sin? Is it abomination?
Well, we could get into the depth of this conversation.
Right.
First, by starting off with the interpretation of scripture and what people understand homosexuality to be.
Right.
And this whole notion of it being an abomination. First of all, this big sin, little sin, I don't see that anywhere in the biblical text. That's religion. That's religion. And sin identified in the text is that which we allow to separate us from God. We do that. And the last time I checked, the text says nothing can separate us from God. But when we intentionally put things in place of God and our relationship with God, we create that separation. Now, do I believe homosexuality separates people from God? No, I don't. And the reason I say that is because, and people don't want to be honest about this, but there have been always in our churches and in our midst, people who have been deeply in relationship with God, moved powerfully. Some we don't even know about.
Right.
Who God has used in phenomenal ways.
Right.
And I think when we get down to what we define as sin, we then become judge and jury around who is accepted by God and who isn't. And that becomes problematic because if we look at it, the fat person who is gluttonous and overeats, that's sin. It's a whole lot of folks out here right now, with these stimulus checks, cracking crab shells and eating crab legs, and what the Bible say about that? We pick and choose because in the church, we always need an other.
Right.
We always need to other somebody. And unfortunately, in our community right now, and this is the sad part of internalized oppression. For so long, Black folks were othered.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're in a position where God has shown us some liberation, and we start othering another group of people. They're not worthy. At one point, we weren't worthy because we had Black skin, and God didn't love us because our souls were Black. That's what white folks told us. And now we tell folks in the LGBTQIA community that they're not loved by God because of their sexual orientation. And for me, that's problematic. first of all, I can't set boundaries on how far God's love goes or grace. I don't draw those lines.
Right.
That's up to God.
Right.
I don't know how far God's love can go. I don't know how far God's grace can go. And I think if the church understood that, we'd be so much more powerful. We'd be so much more inclusive. But there's this innate teaching within the church that we have to have somebody othered to identify as sinful.
Right. No, that's the greatest, that's one of the best answers I've heard, and definitions of it. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's hard for me to have those discussions because it's almost like, being able to back it up, and, you have to get into those spaces. And this is why, it's important for people to hear this from the mouth of leaders, because sometimes we may know, like I have a lot of friends in the LGBT community, LGBTQIA community. And some of them are my best of friends. But to get into a place of conversation, it's nerve-wracking because you don't want to say the wrong thing. You might, even in a space where you're defending someone in the LGBTQIA community, you can end up offending them by using certain terms as, them, other, like you said, we other them still nonetheless, because people that separation is separationism. I just made that word up. Is major.
True.
So no, that's important. I think that and it's so important that more leaders in our community are vocal and create that space, because we're so divided as a community. I even talk to people about how divided we are. If you live in these communities, why it's so hard for Christians and Muslims to be unified, because we're divided. We always, one person's talking about Ramadan, another one's talking about Easter. It's the memes, we're making fun of each other, and we're so divided. I mean, I started this thing called the prayer room, and a lot of people are coming into and they're in my DM, and they're talking about, man, it's the first time that I've really been able to pray in the same room with my brother who's Muslim and my sister who's Christian. And it's just an amazing space, because for me, I'm unconventional. I think we all serve the same God. And I create that room, and I see my Muslim brothers, and I say, yo, salam alaikum, when I see them, because I'm greeting them and letting them know I honor your faith. You know what I mean? It's still like, okay, cool. You may not believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I do. And you believe that Muhammad is a prophet. Cool. I do not have to talk down on your religion, and vice versa. If somebody does talk down on my religion, fine. I give them grace. It doesn't really bother me, because it's almost like my father always used to say, just know whose son you are. I know whose son I am. You know what I'm saying? But for you, what do you think? How is it important for us in our community to come together as Muslims and Christians and stand united?
And that's the definition of ecumenical. That's the definition of ecumenical, being ecumenical and understanding that God speaks to people in various ways.
Right.
And through various mediums. And I have had experiences in my life praying in a mosque and feeling the same spiritual energy and power that I had at a Wednesday night prayer meeting, in the Protestant church.
Right.
But it comes down to respect. So often Christians are just blatantly disrespectful. It's either our way or no way. It's either our God or no God. We pray publicly in that way.
Right.
We don't honor and respect the ways in which other people name God.
Right.
First of all, God is a German word. We don't, we use a German word, and we upset about the fact that somebody Muslim refers to God as Allah. That's a Muslim word. That's how they identify God. If I was on the west coast of Africa, he'd be Olodumare. if I was, anywhere else, he would be he would be Yahweh. He would be Adonai. He'd be Elohim. All of those different names that we hear and experience, we get tied up in that. And that's been problematic in church and culture in general. And I think if we just respected the fact that we all, as you say, are praying to the same, we're identifying that there's a greater source than us.
Right.
What I call him, what I name him or her, is different. And that messes some people up because, God's got to be a male figure. But
yeah. Now, you know what? First of all, let me just commend you on saying Ladun very well, being that I'm Nigerian. that would have threw me for a loop. I would have definitely looked left field at you like, nah, that's good. I mean, I love like to hear, like I said, it's just being able to be in a space where we have these uncomfortable conversations. And I feel like we need to have more of them because we're not having these conversations. What it is that like everyone's just in their shell. And one of the biggest things that's been strong in my movement now is just being vulnerable and being transparent. And a lot of people aren't being vulnerable and transparent. We're not talking about trauma. We're not talking about the traumas that a lot of people have endured in our community. Just from whether it's whether it's physical abuse, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's molestation, whatever these things that we're talking about that are these childhood traumas that are killing us from the inside. You know what I'm saying? We're holding on to these traumas and these resentments, and our body is taking count. And trauma is a big topic in just pop culture right now. But why do you think it's so hard for men to deal with it head on?
Because the way we've been cultured to think, number one, that we're strong enough to handle our trauma, and that our weakness is in expressing the need for assistance with our trauma.
Right.
And that's the evil of patriarchy. Patriarchy is the evil twin of oppression, and patriarchy does damage to us because we feel as if we have to maintain this form of hypermasculinity that makes us more powerful, when in actuality we're suffering. And as you said, many of us are carrying transgenerational trauma that has been handed down to us, and especially Black men in America. Outside of the family trauma we've experienced, we've had tremendous amounts of societal trauma inflicted upon us.
Right.
And we live out of that trauma most times and not identifying with it, but feeling like, I'm a man, I just man up. We tell little children, boys, man up. So they're taught from a young age that crying and expressing my emotions, which is healthy for trauma. We've been given, as I tell people, we've been given emotions as pressure valves to release those things which have adversely affected us. But when you tell people to close those pressure valves, that pressure builds up internally, and it shows up in different ways. And we have to, as men, we have to change the way we understand and identify manhood, because it's killing us.
Right. And it's real, because I think that one of the things, especially as a spiritual leader and reverend and pastor, I think that one thing that is very crucial now is how the church implements mental health work with prayer. Because one of the things I've heard in the past, and now we're a little bit more aware, but I don't think that like it's either prayer or mental health. It's not both that are hand in hand, and it's something that needs to be implemented. What do you think about that?
I think it's important. I think pastors ought to encourage their congregation beyond, so I do counseling. but I also recognize my limitations. I recognize where a psychotherapist may be better for an individual. And I don't hesitate to recommend them, to send them, to understand that we have to have folks in our congregation who are trained to identify what they call mental health aides in the congregation, to understand when people are in crisis,
Right.
and to be able to offer that. And everything that we do in the church, we always believe, because we didn't have resources.
Right.
The point where prayer was all we had. And
Right.
ain't nothing wrong with that. I think prayer can do phenomenal things, but also prayer coupled with mental health counseling and therapy is life-changing. And more of our people need to push, pastors particularly need to push that. And they first need to start with themselves.
Right.
Because if you're vulnerable and transparent about the fact that I go sit down in somebody's chair because life presents itself sometimes very challenging, you give people in your pulpit, in your pews, freedom to do the same.
Right. No, that's so important, because I think that, like, as we can say, faith without works is dead. Faith is the prayer to me. The works is the self-work, the inner work that we do to try and heal. Because I've always said that once you deal with your childhood traumas, is that you create the unlock, the aha moment that leads to where pure joy and happiness reside. And I think a lot of people just have avoided it, man. And a lot of people are dying internally because they are not willing to do the work. And a lot of women, I mean, I don't pick sides, but I do say, and I acknowledge what I see. A lot of women, especially Black women in our community, are dealing with, because women are actually easier. They're a lot more open to dealing and healing. But men, a lot of women are dealing with the fact that they're taking on these men who have decided not to do the trauma, not to do the self-work and not deal with their trauma. And now they're just in this like cycle. It's a cycle that we have to break. And I say it's part of what people call generational curses for us. You know what I mean? The inability to be vulnerable, the inability to be transparent, and the inability to do the self-work, to heal.
So right, man. So right. And women themselves have had the burden of having to be the strong Black woman. And what I'm seeing now is this change, this evolution, to want to be whole. And I think that's, at the end of the day, the question becomes, do you want to be whole? And in being whole, you have to really explore those things which have laid you out in life, and men in particular. One of the things I'm passionate about is the impacts that we can have on Black men, and that's that encouragement, that building of self and understanding of self is important, and that's work the church needs to engage in. Now, I do think there's another part that we're missing, but that is the piece that we need to engage in too.
Right. And this is probably my last question as far as that goes. As far when it comes to, like, people talk about being unequally yoked, do you think that it's possible for a whole person, maybe a female or a male, who is whole, that engages in a relationship with somebody that is not whole? Do you think it's possible for them to have healing, or do they have to do the self-work separately?
That's a great question. I think the work can be done together, and the work can be done separately. I think it's a both and. It depends on the couple. It depends on the relationship. Where it gets challenging is if it is a relationship of codependency, if it is a relationship where I'm enabling you and not really pushing you, or I won't say pushing, but supporting you in that change work that needs to take place. So yeah, you might need to do that on your own. But I do think, just from experience, that couples can do that together. If their heart is in it, if they desire to do it, and if they have the right support structures and they have the right tools to do it. But so often, unfortunately, we come to these relationships with empty toolboxes. We're not equipped to we using a screwdriver when a hammer is needed. And the challenge becomes understanding that we need to equip ourselves to be able to be that kind of support to someone else in a relationship. So if that support is there, and if you have those tools and mechanisms to be able to do it, then it can work. But if not, it's detrimental to both people.
Right. And you mentioned codependency, because this is a conversation that, and I could go on for days. I could get deeper and deeper, but when you talk codependency, what does codependency look like nowadays? So people hear the term, but a lot of people actually don't know sometimes what codependency looks like.
Yeah, I mean, codependency is really it comes down to like being a crutch, where you are dependent upon that person, or that person becomes for you your source of strength, and you take what you should be doing internally for yourself, and you depend on someone else to do that for you, and then that individual thrives off of you depending on them. So they have that what we call the Messiah complex. They feel it's their job to save you, so they're constantly feeding off of you, sucking the life energy out of them to do that. And that codependency never leads into a healthy place. People have to get to a place of individuation, where you are on a soul journey to find what feeds you and makes you an individual. And that's what becomes healthy. But in codependency, you use the other individual in ways that is unhealthy for your own development.
This is a conversation I hear. It's in my DMs, it's in messages, and I would love to just touch on this last question in regards to like B to that. What is if you had to give any solutions to codependency, what would they be? Because a lot of people can't go to therapy. They can't afford therapy. So their therapy is YouTube, and therapy is coming to places like this and hearing these conversations. So when you talk to people who are in codependent situations, what are some solutions to it?
Well, we all can't afford therapy, but there are ways in which we can access therapy. And I would encourage people to really explore that, to really free yourself from that. I would also encourage people who find themselves in those codependent relationships. It's kind of hard to identify it when you're in it.
Right.
You kind of need that outside voice to say, you know what you're talking about and displaying is a codependent relationship. Most times people in it can't see it. Right. But if you do see it, then you need to really start finding ways through journaling, through conversation with others, and setting boundaries and setting goals to kind of remove yourself from being so dependent, and engage in soul work, searching your soul to find your own power and what feeds you, what gives you that power. And that becomes important if people engage in that soul work. That's what psychologists would call individuation. Right. Setting off on a journey to find out who are you, in this world. And that could be the process of freeing yourself from a codependent relationship by just engaging in a journey to find out who you are.
That's good stuff right there. That right there is a bar. That's a bar and necessary. I mean, I could do this. I could go on and on and on in this conversation, because this is just important stuff, and I hear about it and I talk about it. And, even me, a lot of these things I see pieces of myself in, especially when we talk about, from minute of cloth to talking about sin is sin, Black family, trauma. All of these things are just conversations that are so important and are not had a lot. So usually when we wrap, right, before we wrap, we do this rapid questions, and hopefully we can get the best answer out of you.
Okay.
So, here go to rapids. Snowfall or The Wire?
Wire.
Moses, David, or Abraham, and why?
David, because David did his own thing. He didn't rely on Saul's armor.
Biggie or Tupac?
Biggie.
That surprised me with that one. Jay-Z or Nas?
Nas.
Surprising me, Rav. You're surprising me here.
I can't shake Illmatic. I'm sorry, I just can't.
Jordan, LeBron, or Kobe? Who's the GOAT?
Jordan.
Love it. Okay, so then I might know the answer to this one. Jordan 1s or Adidas shell toes?
Jordan 1s.
And the last question is, what is your vice?
My vice?
Yeah. What's that thing that someone might call you an unconventional Christian for?
Scotch and cigars.
Nah. So, okay, cool. So now we're here. The last bonus question goes into Hennessy or Remy?
Hennessy. I got to go with the Hennessy. Got to take me to the hood. Got the 4 Remy.
Look, Reverend Hodari, I appreciate you. I feel like I'm gonna need a part 2 of this. I feel like I'm gonna need you on a round table conversation with some amazing men that I consider my accountability partner. I'm even after this call, I might have to hop on a call on mentorship from you. I'm super appreciative of this conversation. This is definitely one of those times where God sat us down and he stood up, and I'm so thankful and grateful for this conversation.
Well, man, I just want to tell you, I'm a fan of your work and what I have seen, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to have this dialogue. Anytime we can get together, there's a whole bunch of stuff I'd like to talk about that we haven't. But anytime, feel free to reach out, and may God continue to light your path, man, and show you what's before you, because you're doing a great work, and I applaud that.
Thank you, and I appreciate having you on here today. And that's another episode of the Unconventional Christian, and y'all have a blessed one.